Thank you. Thank you very much. So my name is Guillermo Galicia. I work for the global payments team of the World Bank. And we will be discussing here today what we see as a growing disconnect in the digital public infrastructure space. So we are going to present a couple of concepts along with my colleague David Black on how to resolve this existing gap between digital public infrastructure. So right now what we have is basically two different DPIs. One is a national ID scheme, digital ID, and we have been seeing all day long a lot of presentations and points on how this is scaling across different sectors. Even there was some discussion around payments. We still see that these solutions can be further strengthened by being interoperable with other type of DPIs that are highly interoperable, particularly fast payment systems. And just to give an idea, an overview of what is a fast payment system, it's basically a system that enables a transfer of funds on a 24/7 basis instantly. It has been proven that these systems are very inclusive. They bring a lot of competition, a lot of efficiency gains. And the issue that we are facing right now is that even if these systems are scaling globally, we're seeing around more than 100 implementations, they still suffer from issues related to onboarding, to access to transaction accounts, to fraud, which are, I think, issues that we normally see in the digital payments space. So all of these issues can be, we don't think that they are going to be resolved automatically by bringing interoperability between the national ID scheme and a fast payment system, but certainly there can be key enhancements that can drive uptake and access to this type of transactional systems. So the national ID scheme holds very valuable information for the financial sector, national ID attributes that are key for the financial sector and that we think that are not being utilized or leveraged as much as needed by the financial sector. At the same time, there is a lot of information that is held by the payment systems, by the fast payment systems that can also be bundled with what is there in the national ID schemes. And the idea is then how do we interlink, how do we interconnect these two DPIs. So here's where our first concept comes in, and this is what we have called a trusted access and credentialing hub. And basically, this is an overlay service. And an overlay service means that it sits on top of the national ID scheme and also the fast payment system. And it has three specific objectives or functions. One is to provide or anchor the trust framework between the two DPIs, between the fast payment system and the national ID scheme. The second one is basically to provide a consent artifact. So the user that is going to be benefited by this type of interoperability grants consent before any information is exchanged. The third point or the third function of this concept is it acts as an orchestration layer, bringing information from the national ID scheme to the fast payment system for it to be repurposed for financial service actions and payments as well. So, as I mentioned, the trust framework is anchored around this type of overlay service. Then we gather user consent. We also get an ID scheme, a verifiable credential from the ID scheme. And the idea is that we then produce the second concept, which is what we have called a Payments Identity Credential. And the Payments Identity Credential, I would say that it's very much a supercharged payments card. It basically brings information from different providers. It creates verifiable credentials for different PSPs that are also participating in the fast payment system. It also combines the data that is there in the national ID scheme with information that is held by the financial sector. And the idea is that with this, you can build a verifiable credential for a verifiable presentation for a CDD file basically to be able to onboard into a transaction account, an investment account, access credit, and so on. And the other point that we are exploring is how can this Payments Identity Credential also garner and gather information around transactions, and then create another payments data verifiable credential or presentation that can be used for accessing credit and other type of financial services. And this point is key because it not only enables access to different financial services, but it can also enable other type of frameworks that are currently exist or starting to be deployed in many countries, particularly open banking and open finance frameworks. So this is just a very succinct presentation on what is the Payments Identity Credential, what are the different verifiable credentials that it contains. Includes a payee verifiable credential, as I mentioned, a customer due diligence file as well. And then these are the key use cases that we think that can be built around this type of Payments Identity Credential. So if you have access around, on your CDD file, and you are able to share this with any financial services provider, then you can basically open an account remotely or in person. Then, second point, you want to get, one of the biggest issues that we're seeing in fast payment systems and in digital payments globally is issues around fraud. And fraud is escalating every year by very large amounts. And the reason is the reason behind this is basically the cross-border nature and the industrialization of fraud through digital platforms. So if you're able to know who you're paying to by using a verifiable credential for a payee, for example, you are able to have some type of trust and then carry out a payment with full confidence. Then you're able to also authenticate different accounts that have been linked through verifiable credentials from different payment services providers. So you also have interoperability from the access point. So if you are managing a wallet, you are already adding or are able to capable to add all of these credentials. And this might replicate or be very similar to what is ongoing on the multi-issuer wallet space, for example, Apple Pay, Google Pay. The issue here is that we want to move a bit beyond cards and cards networks and also integrate fast payment systems into that access point. Then, as I mentioned, if you have a payments data verifiable credential that holds their transactions, then you are able to provide this to a financial services provider for them to calculate what is your repayment capability, what is your profile as a financial services customer, and you are able to access other type of financial services. And the last use case that we have is basically the role of AI, and we have seen a lot of advancements recently in terms of agents now being commanded or being asked to, for example, carry out purchases or pay bills. So you can delegate one of these verifiable credentials from one of your PSPs and instruct an AI agent to basically execute this type of transactions on your behalf. So what are we thinking about the role, or how can we deliver this in real life example, and also thinking of inclusivity as has been mentioned today? So we are obviously aligning to the concept of wallets that, for example, digital ID wallets that have, for example, health credentials or educational credentials. You can also embed there this type of payments identity credential. So you can use it from this type of access point. But you can also, and this is something that we are designing, you can also embed this type of payments identity credential in the PSP's own apps, or you can have it in a presentation such as a QR code, which are right now very popular when we are thinking about instant payments and real-time payments. So this is just about the delivery of this payments identity credential, and this one being obviously managed and operated and delivered by this Trusted Access and Credentialing Hub. Now, why we think that interoperability between digital ID and fast payment systems is very relevant? First of all, I talk a little about fraud, and this is a great concern. And fraud can basically be countered by first making sure that the payee is the person that you want to pay to, but there are other issues around this. For example, there is an increased growth in mule accounts, and this obviously goes back to the process of onboarding. If you don't have robust verification and authentication mechanisms when onboarding, and then obviously the system is vulnerable to this type of mule accounts. We also want new ways of initiating payments using fast payments as well. These rails are highly interoperable. For example, UPI in India reaches around 700 different participants, from banks to non-banks to fintechs, big techs, all sorts of participants. In Brazil, PIX has already 900 participants connected. So basically, you will be able to access this whole network from maybe a digital ID wallet or a QR code, which is one of the topics or the objectives we want to achieve. I already mentioned a bit the strengthening trust across transactions, and this is also very related to AML CFT, which is a key issue that we want to tackle or help to tackle with new technologies such as confirmation of payee and verification of payee. We also want to boost competition in the wallet ecosystem. As I mentioned, right now, the multi-issuer wallets that we're seeing are only bringing in some specific payment instruments that are only connected to certain networks. So we want to bring in fast payments into this type of multi-issuer wallets for increasing competition, lowering costs, and supporting inclusiveness. We also want to empower users in terms of the control of their access of the data, their authentication credentials. For example, if I'm able to handle on a day-to-day basis in my digital ID wallet a verifiable credential with my payments data, and I'm able to share this with different financial services providers or my customer due diligence file, then I'm able to switch easily between different financial services providers. And finally, we see that there is still a siloed implementation of digital payment, of digital ID and improvements to national ID schemes. And also the same is happening in the fast payment system space. They are not designed to talk to each other, so we want to expand the utility and adoption of DPIs through this. Thank you. Over to David.
I'm actually going to skip this slide almost because it speaks for itself, and Guillermo's done such a good job at explaining some of the benefits. Key benefits, though, this is a enabler on top of existing DPI. This is to bring functions that some of you may already have in your countries, such as checking who the payer is. That infrastructure may already exist. This brings that infrastructure to countries such as developing nations and others where they're just implementing these things at first. This fast tracks them to there. And second, most importantly, it's not necessarily a product. It may well be a set of policies, guidance, guidelines, and standards that can be implemented. And that's important because we recognize that certain countries are going to be on a different maturity curve, and we could, in inference, come in where the national bank has a set of strategies versus the ID scheme. And so things like how to set up the trust frameworks, et cetera, are really important. And we came to a wallet conference, so we couldn't go without the issuer holder verifier diagram. So there it is. I'm not going to go into all the pieces on here, but the important things are these. When somebody onboards using their national ID, and the starting point for this is that the national ID or the identity thing is in place, what's key for this is that there is this PIC issued by the PSP, and you can then use that PIC during your transactions, for instance, verifying who the payer is. The merchant or the payee, for instance, will get a PIC. They can use that to initiate or selectively use parts of that. I'm going to move through this very quickly. The most important thing here is this is not the payments network. We are not making payments through this. We are assuring and making sure that the payments are free of fraud and error, basically, and making it quick. So the payment system still aligns along the bottom, and we're doing quite a few things with the payment system to enable this. This is so simple, but it's not necessarily true because we've got consent and things, but basically you'd authenticate, you'd take the QR code off the merchant, you would authenticate with the wallet. The last box on here is the most important, that this is a verifiable presentation with the contents of the PIC from your PSP, which is your details, the PIC from the merchant's PSP or selective PIC, which is their details, transaction reference and amount, which is from the transaction. And you might have a choice of PICs that you use. You might decide to use a different account. So you can hold multiple PICs in your wallet. Shall I do the last slide because of time? Shall I just quickly, do you want me to do it or do you want to do it? Okay, because we're out of time and very quickly, we're going to stress test this. What does that mean? We're doing papers and that we want to get out and we want people's comments on. We recognise that we have payments experts in the room and we want to be talking to you. We have standards experts in the room, we have payload experts in the room, and we have various others. This is not a closed project by any means. We want that input from the industry as we move forward. And we have lawyers, funnily enough, so we do things like right to legal presence, right to representation, all those VCs. We need to consider those through and also look at the legal structures of the trust frameworks, which we'll be doing during our work. Thank you.